My life in Clearwater Ridge was built on the quiet pride of finally being the one who did not need saving. That illusion shattered on a mundane Tuesday afternoon, somewhere between a budget meeting and a lukewarm coffee, when a collection agent asked me about 3 months of unpaid bills for a card I never held. I thought it was a scam. I never imagined the thief was someone who knew my mother's maiden name because it was her mother's, too. Peace was a commodity I had purchased at a very high premium. It cost me years of emotional distance, thousands of dollars in therapy, and the geographical buffer of a 20-minute drive across the city limits of Clearwater Ridge. At 32 years old, I had finally curated a life that belonged entirely to me. My apartment was not large. It was a one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a complex that smelled faintly of dryer sheets and rain. But the rent was paid automatically on the first of every month. The white walls were free of scuff marks, and the silence in the evenings was mine to fill or leave empty. There were no sudden crises. There were no weeping phone calls at 2 a.m. There was just my job as a project coordinator at North Lane Systems, my succulents on the windowsill, and the steady, rhythmic hum of a predictable existence. I loved the boredom. I cherished it the way other people cherished adrenaline. It was a Tuesday in mid-October when the foundation of that piece developed a hairline fracture. I was sitting at my desk at North Lane, staring at a Gantt chart that mapped out the implementation of a new software update for a logistics client. The office was quiet, save for the low murmur of the sales team down the hall and the clicking of keyboards. My coworker, Ben, sat in the cubicle adjacent to mine. We had a comfortable rhythm of shared silence and occasional complaints about the break room coffee. My desk phone rang. I frowned, checking the caller ID. It was a toll-free number I did not recognize. Usually, I let those go to voicemail, but I was expecting a call from a vendor regarding the logistics project, so I picked up the receiver and cradled it against my shoulder. "This is Madeline," I said, my voice pitched in my professional register. There was a pause, a rush of static, and then a woman's voice, sharp and tinny, cut through the line. "I am looking for Madeline Patterson, speaking. This is Brenda calling from Harborline Collections regarding a personal matter. I need to verify the last 4 digits of your social security number before we proceed." My fingers stopped hovering over my keyboard. The air in the office suddenly felt very still. I kept my voice low, conscious of Ben sitting less than 5 feet away. "I am sorry. Who is this?" "Harborline Collections," the woman repeated, her tone flattening into bored aggression. "We are attempting to collect a debt of $4,280 connected to a Platinum Visa account that is now 90 days past due. If we do not receive payment or a payment plan today, this account will be escalated to legal." I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It was a mistake. It had to be. I was meticulous with my finances. I had 1 credit card, which I paid off in full every Friday. I had a car payment, rent, and student loans. That was it. "You have the wrong person," I said, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. "I do not have a Platinum Visa. I do not have any outstanding debts, ma'am. I have your name, your social security number, and your date of birth on file," the woman said. "The account was opened 14 months ago. That is impossible," I snapped, louder than I intended. Ben turned in his chair, his eyebrows raised in question. I turned my back to him, hunching over the phone, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I have never opened that card," I whispered harsh and fast. "This is a scam. Do not call this number again." I slammed the receiver down. My hand was shaking. I stared at the beige plastic of the phone, waiting for my breathing to even out. "Everything okay?" Ben asked tentatively. I forced a laugh. It sounded brittle and fake. "Just a spam call," I said. "They are getting aggressive these days." Ben nodded and went back to his typing. But the shame lingered, sticking to my skin like humidity. I tried to return to my Gantt chart, but the numbers swam before my eyes. $4,200. It was a specific number. Scams usually asked for gift cards or generic wire transfers. They did not usually cite specific account ages. I made it another 20 minutes before the anxiety became a physical weight in my stomach. I locked my computer and grabbed my purse. I'm going to take my lunch break early. I told Ben. I went out to my car, a reliable silver sedan parked in the back corner of the lot. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and the windows rolled up, creating a sealed capsule of silence. I pulled out my phone. My hands were cold. I opened the credit monitoring app I had installed years ago and rarely checked. The logo spun for a moment, mocking me with its cheerful blue color. Before the dashboard loaded, my credit score, usually a point of pride in the high 700s, had plummeted. It was a number I did not recognize. A number that belonged to someone careless, someone reckless. I tapped on the tab labeled Open Accounts. My breath hitched in my throat. There was my student loan, there was my car lease, and then there was a list that went on and on. A credit card with a balance of $3,000, another with $4,000. A personal line of credit maxed out at $10,000, and at the very bottom, a small business loan originating from Ridgeway Bank for $25,000. I stared at the screen, blinking rapidly, waiting for the numbers to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They did not move. According to this screen, I was not the responsible project coordinator who meal prepped on Sundays and saved 15% of her paycheck. I was drowning in nearly $45,000 of debt. I felt sick. A cold, oily nausea rolled through me. I scrolled through the details. The opening dates were staggered over the last 12 to 18 months. The most recent one, a store credit card for a high-end electronics retailer, had been opened just 3 weeks ago. It is identity theft. I said aloud to the empty car. The sound of my own voice helped ground me. Someone stole my information. A stranger, a hacker in a basement somewhere. I needed to call someone. I needed to hear a voice that would tell me this was fixable, that this happened to people all the time, and it would be resolved with a few phone calls. I dialed my mother's number. Linda Patterson answered on the fourth ring. I could hear the television blaring in the background, the distinct sound of a daytime talk show audience cheering. "Hello? Mom, it is me, Madeline." Her voice sounded distracted. "Is everything all right? You are calling in the middle of the workday." I gripped the steering wheel with my free hand. "I think something bad has happened. I just got a call from a collection agency. Someone has stolen my identity. Mom, they have opened a bunch of credit cards and a business loan in my name." There was a pause. I heard her shift the phone, and the volume of the TV went down slightly, though not completely. "Oh, Madeline, are you sure? You know how you get worked up about these things. It is probably just a computer glitch. Your father got a letter last week saying he owed a library fine from 1998. Computers make mistakes all the time. This is not a library fine." I said, my voice rising. "Mom, there is $45,000 of debt on my credit report." "45,000? She whistled, a low, dismissive sound. "Well, that is obviously a mistake. Just call the bank and tell them, 'I do not know why you are panicking. I am panicking because my credit is ruined.'" I said. I felt the familiar sting of tears, the old frustration of trying to make her see me, really see me, and failing. "I need to file a police report. I do not even know where to start." I heard my father, Harold, in the background. "Who is that?" "It is Madeline," my mother called out to him. "Away from the receiver. She is upset about some bank error." She came back to the line. "Honey, do not be dramatic. You do not need to involve the police for a computer glitch. That seems like an overreaction. Just call the bank customer service line. You are always so quick to assume the worst." "I am not assuming," I said, fighting the urge to scream. "I am looking at the report." "Well, you never call unless something is wrong. Do you?" She sighed. "I was just about to make lunch for your father. Look, call the bank. It will be fine. You are smart. You figure these things out. That is what you do." The line went dead before I could say goodbye. I lowered the phone, staring at the screen. The call had lasted less than 3 minutes. I sat there for a long time, watching a stray wrapper blow across the asphalt of the parking lot. The dismissal was so practiced, so routine, that it almost felt comfortable. Madeline, the dramatic one, Madeline the worrier. Madeline who handles it herself. I went back to work. I sat at my desk and answered emails. I updated the Gantt chart. I smiled at Ben when he asked if I was feeling better. I functioned, because that was my role. But beneath the surface, I was vibrating with terror. That evening, I did not go straight home. I drove to the liquor store and bought a bottle of cheap Pinot Grigio, then knocked on the door of apartment 2B. Tessa Moran opened the door wearing oversized sweatpants and a messy bun. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "Wine first, talk second," she said. Tessa was everything I was not. Loud, impulsive, and fiercely protective. We had met 2 years ago when she accidentally accepted a package of mine, and she had been my anchor in Clearwater Ridge ever since. I sat on her velvet couch and poured the story out. I told her about the call from Harborline. I showed her the credit report on my phone. Tessa scrolled through the list, her eyes widening. "Holy hell. Maddie," she whispered. "A business loan? Ridgeway Bank? That is serious money." "I know," I said, hugging a throw pillow to my chest. "My mom thinks it is a computer glitch." "Your mom thinks global warming is a suggestion," Tessa said, handing me a glass of wine. "This is not a glitch. This is fraud. You need to freeze everything. Tonight. Right now." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted sour. I tried to do that, but the app is asking for a PIN I do not have. Whoever did this might have set up their own security on the accounts. "Then we call them," Tessa said firmly, "and you need to file a police report. Tomorrow morning." I hesitated. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Do not be dramatic. Maybe I can just dispute it." I said, "If I file a report, it becomes this whole legal thing. If it is just a stranger, maybe the bank can just wipe it." Tessa stared at me. "Madeline, someone stole 45 grand in your name. This is already a legal thing. You are the victim here. Stop acting like you are the inconvenience." She was right. I knew she was right. But the habit of minimizing my own problems was a groove worn deep into my brain. We spent the next 2 hours on her laptop. We managed to place a fraud alert on my files with the 3 major bureaus. It was tedious, exhausting work. My eyes blurred from reading security questions and CAPTCHA codes. "Okay, let us look at the full PDF report," Tessa said, clicking open a file she had downloaded. Sometimes it shows more detail than the app. She scrolled past the summary, down to the section labeled Personal Information. "Here we go," she said. "Addresses reported by creditors." I leaned in, squinting at the screen. There was my current address on Elm Street. Below that, my old apartment on 4th, and then a third address. Correspondence address, 1402 Ashwood Lane, Clearwater Ridge. The air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. "What is it?" Tessa asked, looking at me. "Do you know that place?" I nodded slowly. "That is my parents' house." Tessa frowned. "Did you live there recently?" "No." I said, "I moved out 8 years ago. I have not received mail there since I was 24. "Maybe it is just an old link?" Tessa suggested, though she sounded unconvinced. "Like, the system just linked you to your parents?" I stared at the address. 1402 Ashwood Lane. It was listed next to the Ridgeway Bank small business loan and 3 of the credit cards. A memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp. It was about a year ago. I was at my apartment, folding laundry, when my younger sister, Brooke, had texted me. "Hey Mads, weird favor. I am applying for this driving gig and I left my license at the bar last night like an idiot. Can you send me a pic of yours? I just need to put in the layout/format numbers for the app so I can save the progress. I will scan mine when I get it back tomorrow." "Please help." I had hesitated. It seemed odd, but Brooke was always losing things. Brooke was always in a scramble, always one step behind, always needing a small save. I had texted back, "That sounds sketchy. Brooke?" She had replied immediately, "OMG. It is not sketchy. It is for an app. Please, Mads, I really need this job. Mom is already on my case about the rent." So I had done it. I had walked over to my purse, pulled out my license, snapped a photo of the front and back, and texted it to her. "Thank you. You are the best," she had replied. I had never asked about the job again. I assumed she got it, or she did not, with Brooke. The details always changed. I felt a coldness spread through my limbs, starting at my fingertips and moving inward. "Tessa," I whispered. "Yeah? Why would the bank send mail to my parents' house?" Tessa looked at me, her expression softening into something pitying that I hated. "Maybe the person who stole your identity used that address? But why?" I asked. "If you are a thief, you do not use the victim's parents' address. You use a P.O. box. You use an abandoned house. You do not use a house where the people know the victim. Unless," Tessa said softly. She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. I stood up. "I need to go." "Maddie, you have been drinking. You cannot drive." "I am not driving," I said, grabbing my purse. "I am going home. I need to think." I walked back to my apartment in a daze. The night air was cool, but I was sweating. It was not possible. Brooke was messy. She was irresponsible. She borrowed money and forgot to pay it back. She lost jobs. She dated guys who drove cars with missing bumpers. But she was my sister. We had shared a room until I was 18. I had helped her with her homework. I had lied to cover for her when she snuck out. She would not do this. She would not destroy me. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with terrifying speed in the dark of my bedroom. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety. I went to work. I did my job. But every time my phone rang, I jumped. Every time I looked at a spreadsheet, I saw the number 45,000. By Friday, I had made a decision. I could not accuse my family based on a hunch. I needed proof. I needed to know why that address was on the report. I called my mother on Saturday morning. "Hey, Mom," I said, forcing a cheerfulness I did not feel. "I was thinking of swinging by today. I have some old winter coats I think I left in the hall closet, and I wanted to grab them before it gets cold." "Oh, that is nice," Linda said. "We are just hanging around. Your father is working on the lawn. Brooke is here, too. She is staying with us for a few days while her apartment gets painted." "Right," I said, "her apartment getting painted. Just like the time her car was in the shop for 3 weeks. Just like the time she lost her phone for a month. I will see you in an hour." I said, the drive to Ashwood Lane usually took 20 minutes. Today, it felt like 5. I pulled into the driveway. My father was pushing a mower across the front lawn. He waved at me, a vague, distracted gesture. I waved back and walked to the front door. The house smelled the way it always did. Potpourri and stale coffee. "Hello?" I called out. "In the kitchen," my mother answered. I walked down the hallway. The house was cluttered. It always had been. Stacks of magazines, boxes of things that needed to be sorted, knickknacks gathering dust. It was the physical manifestation of my parents' inability to let anything go. Linda was at the sink, washing dishes. She turned and smiled. "Well, look who it is. The stranger returns." "Hi, Mom. Did you sort out that bank error?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "I am working on it," I said non-committally. "I told you it was nothing to worry about," she said. Turning back to the sink, "There is lasagna in the fridge if you are hungry." "I am okay," I said. I looked around the kitchen. The counters were covered in the usual debris of daily life: a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a set of keys, and the mail. There was a stack of mail on the corner of the island, teetering precariously. It was a mix of catalogs, flyers, and envelopes. I walked over to it. My heart was thudding in my ears. I felt like an intruder in my own childhood home. "So, where is Brooke?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "She is still asleep," Linda said. "She had a late night." I reached out and touched the stack of mail. I fanned it out, just slightly. Electric bill, addressed to Harold Patterson. Coupon booklet, jury duty summons for Linda Patterson. Catalog for gardening supplies. And then, near the bottom, a white business envelope with a cellophane window. I froze. The return address logo was blue and gray, a stylized mountain peak. Ridgeway Bank. I pulled the envelope out of the stack. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the recipient name in the window. Madeline Patterson, care of Linda Patterson, 1402, Ashwood Lane, Clearwater Ridge. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The noise of the running water in the sink faded away. The hum of the refrigerator vanished. All I could see was my name, typed in black ink, on an envelope that should not exist, in a house where I did not live. It was unopened. It had been sitting there, for days, weeks. My mother turned off the tap. She turned around. "Did you find those coats?" she asked. She stopped when she saw me. She saw the envelope in my hand. Her eyes flicked to it, then up to my face, and for a split second, I saw something that looked like fear, but it was gone instantly, replaced by a mask of confusion. "What do you have there?" she asked. I held up the envelope. My hand was not shaking anymore. It was steady, anchored by the terrible weight of the truth. "Why is Ridgeway Bank sending mail to me here?" I asked. My voice was very quiet. Linda wiped her hands on her apron again. She laughed. A nervous, fluttering sound. "Oh, that? It is just junk mail. Madeline. You know how they send those credit card offers to everyone? I was going to throw it out. It is not an offer." "Mom," I said. I could feel the thickness of the paper inside. I could feel the edges of a statement. It says, "Account information enclosed." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the way she would not meet my eyes. I saw the way her shoulders had climbed up toward her ears. "You knew." I said, "It was not a question." "Madeline." "Do not be silly," she said, taking a step toward me. "Give me that. I will put it in the recycling." I took a step back. "No, Madeline, I am going to open it." I said. I ripped the flap of the envelope. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. "Madeline, stop it," Linda snapped. "That is private. It is addressed to me," I shouted. I pulled out the folded papers. I unfolded them. It was a loan statement. Ridgeway Bank Small Business Loan. Principal balance, $24,850. Borrower, Madeline Patterson. Co-borrower, N/A, past due amount, $1,200. I looked up at my mother. She was pale. She was pressing the dish towel against her mouth. "This is not a scam," I said. My voice sounded strange, detached, as if I were speaking from underwater. "This is real. Someone took out a $25,000 loan in my name using this address." I stared at the paperwork again. I looked at the date. It was opened 11 months ago. "Who did this?" I asked. My mother did not answer. She just looked toward the hallway, toward the back of the house where the bedrooms were, toward the room that used to be mine, and then became a storage room, and was now occupied by the sister who was staying for a few days. I followed her gaze. I felt the last structural beam of my peaceful life give way. The roof was caving in, and I was standing directly underneath it. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered. I turned and walked toward the hallway, clutching the statement in my hand like a weapon. "Madeline, wait!" my mother hissed, grabbing at my arm. "Do not wake her up. She is not feeling well." I shook her off. I did not care if Brooke was feeling well. I did not care about the peace. I did not care about the neighbors. I walked to the bedroom door. I could hear the faint sound of snoring from inside. I reached for the handle. "Madeline!" my mother pleaded behind me. "Please." I threw the door open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn against the midday sun. It smelled of stale perfume and sleep. There was a lump under the duvet on the twin bed, and on the desk, right next to the bed, sat a laptop, open. Next to the laptop was a stack of papers, and on top of that stack was a driver's license, my driver's license, or at least, a color copy of it. I walked into the room. "Brooke," I said. The lump in the bed stirred. Brooke sat up, blinking in the sudden light from the hallway. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles. She looked young, and small, and tired. "Mads?" she croaked, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing here?" I looked at her. I looked at the statement in my hand. I looked at the copy of my license on her desk. I held up the paper. "Tell me this is not what I think it is," I said. Brooke squinted at the paper. Then her eyes widened. All the color drained from her face. "Oh," she whispered, and in that single syllable, I heard the end of everything, the end of my trust, the end of my safety, the end of us. I stood there, the paper trembling in my hand, and waited for the world to stop spinning. It did not. It just spun faster, spiraling down into the dark. My parents had called me vindictive for years, for small things, for setting boundaries, for saying no. They had no idea what vindictive looked like yet, but looking at my sister's terrified face and feeling the ruin of my life in my hands, I had a feeling they were about to find out. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, the kind of suffocating quiet that usually precedes a tornado siren. I stood by the granite island, my knuckles white as I gripped the Ridgeway Bank envelope. My mother, Linda, was wiping a spot on the counter that was already clean. Her movements jerky and frantic. My father, Harold, stood by the sliding glass door, staring out at the backyard as if the overgrown hydrangeas held the answers to the questions I was about to ask. "You knew," I said again. My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The accusation hung in the air between us, vibrating with the energy of a struck bell. Linda threw the dish towel down on the counter with a wet slap. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Madeline," she snapped, turning to face me. Her face was flushed, a mottled red that crept up from her neck. "You are acting like I was hiding a body. It is a piece of mail. One piece of mail. It is a loan statement." "Mom," I said, holding the paper up, "it is a loan statement for $25,000 in my name, and it was sent here, to your house, and you opened it. I did not open it on purpose." She lied. Her eyes darted away from mine. "I was going through the bills and I just slit the top before I realized it was yours. I was going to give it to you." "When?" I asked. "When were you going to give it to me?" "It is dated 3 weeks ago. The payment is past due. When were you planning to mention that someone had taken out a mortgage worth of debt in my name?" "Eventually," she cried, throwing her hands up. I forgot. It sat there and I got busy with your father's doctor appointments and the garden and everything else. I thought it was just one of those boring bank things. You know how they send those privacy notices? I did not think it was important. I felt a vain throb in my temple. You did not think a collection notice was important? You saw the amount. You saw the name." "Madeline, stop badgering your mother," Harold grumbled from the doorway. He did not turn around. I turned my focus to him. "And you? Did you think it was junk mail too?" Harold shifted his weight. He was a big man who had spent his life avoiding conflict by simply pretending it was not happening. "I do not handle the mail," he muttered. "But you knew about the loan." I said, "It was a guess, a stab in the dark." But I saw his shoulders stiffen. He cleared his throat. "I knew Brooke was working on something. For her business. That clothing thing. Clearview Threads. I supplied. The business that failed 6 months ago. She mentioned she was getting some capital," Harold said, his voice gaining a little more strength now that he had a narrative to latch onto. "She said she needed a co-signer or something to get the rates down. She mentioned something about helping with a loan." I stared at him. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "Helping with a loan," I repeated slowly. "Dad, I did not sign this. I did not co-sign this. I did not know this existed until 3 days ago when a collection agency called me at work." Harold turned then. His face crumpled in confusion. "Well, she said you two talked about it. She said you agreed to help her get back on her feet. I felt the blood drain from my face. She lied to you. Now, do not jump to conclusions," Linda interjected, stepping between us. "You know how Brooke gets confused with the details. She probably thought you knew. She probably meant to ask you and just got ahead of herself." "Got ahead of herself?" I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound that hurt my throat. "Mom, this is not buying a pair of shoes on my card and forgetting to Venmo me. This is federal fraud. This is $25,000. "Lower your voice," Linda hissed. glancing toward the hallway. "Your sister is sleeping. She has had a very hard week. I do not care about her week." I said, "I care about the fact that my credit score is destroyed. I care that I might lose my job because of this." I turned away from them. I could not look at them anymore. Their denial was a physical wall, thick and impenetrable. I needed answers, and I knew I would not get them from the two people standing in the kitchen who were more concerned with keeping the peace than with the fact that their eldest daughter had been robbed. I walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway. "Where are you going?" Linda called out, her voice rising in panic. "Madeline, do not you go in there." I ignored her. I walked straight to the door at the end of the hall. It used to be my bedroom. Now, it was the catch-all room, the room where things went to be forgotten. I pushed the door open. The room was dim, the blinds drawn tight against the afternoon sun. It smelled of cardboard and old cedar. Boxes were stacked against the walls. Christmas decorations, old winter coats, bins of tax returns from the 90s. In the corner, squeezed between a plastic tub labeled Easter and a broken treadmill, was a small desk. It was covered in a chaotic layer of papers, makeup palettes, and empty coffee cups. I walked over to it. I started shifting the papers. "Madeline!" Linda was in the doorway now, breathing hard. "You have no right to snoop through her things. I have every right," I said without looking back, "if my name is on the paperwork. These are my things." I pushed aside a stack of fashion magazines and found a manila folder wedged behind a box of glass ornaments. It was wrinkled, as if it had been shoved there in a hurry. I pulled it out. I opened it. The first page was a printout of an online application for Summit Line Finance. Applicant: Madeline R. Patterson. Social Security number: XXX-XX-XXXX. Annual income: $85,000. I stared at the income line. I did not make $85,000. I made $62,000. I flipped the page. There was a copy of my driver's license, the one I had texted her, the one she said she needed for a driving job. I flipped another page. There was a lease agreement for a commercial space in downtown Clearwater Ridge. Tenant: Madeline Patterson. Signature: Madeline Patterson. The signature was a good loop, a practiced curve. It looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. The P was slightly too flourished. I felt sick. My hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. I looked at the contact information on the application. Phone: 555-0199. My parents' landline. Email: madeline.patterson.bizgmail.com. I did not own that email address. I stood there, staring at the proof of my own erasure. It was systematic. It was detailed. She had not just clicked a button. She had built an entire persona. She had become me, a wealthier, more entrepreneurial version of me, and she had sold that version to the highest bidder. "What are you doing?" The voice was scratchy, thick with sleep. I turned around. Brooke was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame. She looked terrible. Her blonde hair was matted at the back, her face pale and puffy. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt that hung off one shoulder. She looked like a child who had woken up from a nightmare. I held up the folder. "I am looking at your business plan," I said. Brooke blinked. Her eyes focused on the yellow folder in my hand, and I watched the realization hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her gaze darted to Linda, who was standing behind her, twisting her hands. "Mads," she whispered. "Do not call me that," I said. My voice was deadly calm. Brooke took a step into the room. Her hands came up in a pleading gesture. "Look, I can explain. It is not what it looks like." "Really?" I asked. "Because it looks like you used my social security number to open a fake email account, apply for 5 credit cards, and take out a business loan. Is it something else? Is it a creative writing project?" Brooke burst into tears. It was instantaneous, a sudden dam breaking that I had seen 1,000 times before. "I did not mean for it to get this bad," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. Clearview Threads was supposed to take off. I had all this inventory coming in. and the manufacturer demanded payment up front, and I needed a jump start, just a little bridge loan to get the stock. So you stole my identity? I asked. I borrowed it, she wailed. I was going to pay it back. I had a spreadsheet. Madeline! I was going to pay off the monthly minimums until the holiday sales kicked in, and then I was going to pay the whole lump sum. You never would have known. I never would have known, I repeated. You realize that is worse, right? You were going to keep this a secret forever? I did not want you to worry, Brooke cried. She looked at our mother. Mom, tell her. I told you I had a plan. Linda rushed forward and wrapped her arms around Brooke, pulling her head down onto her shoulder. She stroked Brooke's hair, glaring at me over her sister's trembling frame. Look at her, Madeline, Linda spat. Look at what you are doing. She is shaking. She is obviously sick with guilt. Do you have to be so cruel? I felt as if I had been slapped. Cruel? I asked, my voice rising an octave. Mom, she stole $45,000 from me. She committed a felony. And you are comforting her? She made a mistake, Linda shouted back. She is your sister. She was trying to build something for herself. God forbid she tries to be successful like you. You have everything. Madeline, you have the good job, the apartment, the new car. Brooke has been struggling. She just wanted a chance. I looked at Harold. He was standing in the hall now, looking at the floor. Dad, I said, are you hearing this? Harold sighed deeply. He looked tired. Madeline, nobody is saying what Brooke did was right. It was ill-advised. Ill-advised. I repeated. It is theft. But, Harold continued, raising his voice slightly to talk over me, we are a family. We do not kick each other when we are down. Brooke is clearly going through a hard time. Her business failed. She is heartbroken. I looked back at the papers in my hand. I saw a charge for the Golden Chip Casino, online, $400. I saw a charge for Lux Spa, $250. I flipped the page and held it up. Is online gambling part of the business plan? I asked. Is the spa day part of the inventory costs? Brooke let out a fresh wail of despair. I was stressed. I just needed to blow off steam. I stepped toward her, and Linda physically blocked me, shielding Brooke with her body. Get away from her, Linda warned. You are hysterical. I am hysterical? I laughed again, and this time it sounded like it was coming from someone else. I walked past them, out of the suffocating room, into the living room. I needed air. I needed space. They followed me. Of course they followed me. They could not let me leave with the narrative uncontrolled. We need to talk about this rationally, Harold said, hurrying after me. Madeline, sit down. Let us figure this out. There is nothing to figure out, I said, turning to face them in the center of the living room. The carpet was the same beige shag that had been there since I was 10. Everything in this house was stuck in time. I am going to the police. The room went silent. Absolute, dead silence. Brooke stopped crying. She pulled away from Linda, her face blotchy and terrified. The police? She whispered. Mads, no, you cannot. I have to. I said, I cannot fix this on my own. The banks will not believe me unless I have a fraud report. If I do not file, I am liable for the debt. I will be paying for your jumpstart for the next 10 years. You cannot call the police on your own sister, Linda said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Think about what that would do. You would send her to prison? Over money? It is not just money. Mom, I shouted, it is my name. It is my life. It is numbers on a screen, Linda shouted back. We can fix it. We can pay it off slowly. Dad and I can help. We cannot afford $45,000, Harold said quietly. We will find a way, Linda insisted. Turning to him, we will take a second mortgage. We will sell the boat. But we are not letting our daughter go to jail because Madeline is on a power trip. A power trip. The words hung there. Is that what you think this is? I asked, my voice trembling. You think I am enjoying this? I think you have always been jealous of the attention Brooke needs, Linda said coldly. You have always been the perfect one, the martyr. And now you finally have a chance to crush her. and you are taking it." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me. I saw the resentment that had been burying itself under the surface for decades finally break through the soil. She did not see a victim standing in front of her. She saw a threat to her baby. Brooke stepped forward. Reaching for my hand, I flinched away. "Mads, please," she begged. "I swear I will fix it. I will get a job. I will wait tables. I will give you every cent I make. Just do not turn me in. Please, I cannot go to jail. I will die in there. Just handle it privately." "For me?" I looked at Brooke. I saw the manipulation in her eyes, sharp and familiar. She believed she could talk her way out of this because she had talked her way out of everything. The broken vase, the dented fender, the stolen cash from her summer job at the market. I took a deep breath. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. "I cannot do that." "Brooke," I said, "then get out." Linda said. I looked at her. "What? If you are going to destroy this family, then get out of my house," Linda said, pointing at the door. Her hand was shaking. I nodded. "Fine." I turned and walked toward the front door. "Wait," Harold called out. I did not wait. I opened the door. But as I stepped onto the porch, a thought struck me. A survival instinct. I paused. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I still had the folder in my hand. I had carried it out with me. I opened it on the porch railing. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady enough. I snapped a photo of the loan application. I snapped a photo of the fake email address. I snapped a photo of the signature. I snapped a photo of the driver's license copy. Then, I heard the front door open behind me. "Give me that!" Linda lunged for the folder. I let her take it. I did not need the paper anymore. I had the pixels. She snatched the folder to her chest, glaring at me with pure hatred. "Do not come back until you are ready to apologize." She spat. I looked at her one last time. I looked at the house that had never really been a home. "I do not think I will be back." "Mom," I said. I walked to my car. I got in. I locked the doors. I drove 2 blocks before I had to pull over because I was crying so hard I could not see the road. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, screaming into the silence of the car. It was a guttural, ugly sound. The sound of something breaking that could never be put back together. That night, my apartment felt too big. The silence I usually loved felt heavy and menacing. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, rhythmic circles. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the folder. I saw the date on the first application. 12 months ago, for a year. She had been looking me in the eye, eating lunch with me, asking me for advice, all while she was systematically dismantling my life. And my parents knew, or at least, they suspected, and they had chosen silence. A memory drifted up from the deep recesses of my childhood. I was 12, Brooke was 8. We were in the living room. Brooke had been playing with a heavy crystal vase that sat on the mantelpiece, throwing a rubber ball against the wall. I had told her to stop. She had ignored me. The ball had gone wide. It hit the vase. The crash was spectacular. Shards of crystal everywhere. My mother had come running in. "What happened?" she had screamed. Brooke had started crying immediately. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Madeline did it," she wailed. She was trying to catch the ball. My mother had turned to me. Her face was a mask of disappointment. "Madeline, you know better," she had said. "You are the oldest. You have to be more careful." I had opened my mouth to defend myself. I had wanted to scream, "It was not me." But then I had looked at Brooke. She was so small. She was looking at me with wide, terrified eyes, begging me silently to take the hit. And I am sorry. Mom, I had mumbled, it was an accident. I had spent 2 weeks grounded. I had paid for the vase out of my allowance, and Brooke had learned a lesson that day, a lesson she had carried with her for 20 years. Madeline will fix it. Madeline will take the blame. Madeline is strong enough to carry the weight. I rolled over in bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. The streetlights outside cast long, skeletal shadows across the floor. That was the dynamic. That was the contract we had signed without my consent. I was the shield, and she was the one who needed protecting. But this was not a vase. This was not a dented fender. This was $45,000. This was 5 years of prison time. I thought about the photos on my phone. I thought about the police station downtown. I knew what I had to do, and I knew that doing it would cost me the only family I had. But as I lay there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the empty kitchen, I realized that I had already lost them. I had lost them the moment they decided that my sacrifice was a price they were willing to pay for their comfort. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. Only the spinning fan, and the echo of my mother's voice. "You are always so dramatic." I would show them drama. I would show them exactly what happened when the shield finally decided to become a sword. The blue light of my laptop screen was the only thing illuminating my living room at 3 a.m. My eyes felt gritty, burning with a mixture of exhaustion and the strain of reading legal text for 4 hours straight. I sat on my couch, wrapped in a duvet that offered no warmth. Scrolling through the website of the Clearwater Ridge Legal Aid Center, I was looking for a loophole. I was looking for a clause, a paragraph, a tiny asterisk that would tell me I could fix $45,000 of fraud without destroying my sister. I found nothing. What I found instead were words that terrified me. Complicit. Civil liability, authorized user, constructive knowledge. The text was dry, but the meaning was violent. It explained that if a victim of identity theft discovers the fraud and fails to report it to law enforcement within a reasonable time frame, creditors could argue that the victim had retroactively accepted the debt. It explained that by knowing about the crime and staying silent, I could be viewed not as a victim, but as a co-conspirator. I closed the laptop with a snap that echoed in the silent apartment. I rubbed my face with my hands. The logic was closing in on me like a vice. If I reported Brooke, she would have a criminal record. If I did not report Brooke, I would be liable for the debt, and I could not pay the debt. Therefore, if I did not report her, I would be sued. I would have my wages garnished. I would be financially ruined for a decade. There was no third option. There was no magic door where everyone walked away happy. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m, only to be woken at 6 by my alarm. I showered, dressed in my sharpest blazer, and applied enough concealer to hide the purple bruises of fatigue under my eyes. I had an appointment to keep. At 8 a.m, I sat across from a man named Mr. Henderson at Harborview Credit Services. His office was beige and smelled of stale coffee and copier toner. He was a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a row of family photos on his desk, which made what he had to say feel even more devastating. He looked at the spreadsheet I had compiled. He looked at the photos of the documents I had taken on my mother's porch. "Ms. Patterson," he said, folding his hands over the file. "I see this quite often. We call it familial fraud. It is actually the most common form of identity theft we encounter." I nodded, gripping the strap of my purse. "Is there a way to handle it internally?" I asked. "Can I just tell the banks it was a mistake? Can I set up a payment plan without naming names?" "Mr." Henderson sighed. He took off his glasses and cleaned them on his tie. "Here is the reality," he said gently. "To a bank, there is no such thing as a mistake of this magnitude. There is either authorized debt or there is fraud. If you tell them it is not your debt, they will require a police report to prove it. They need an affidavit of identity theft. Without that legal document, they have no reason to write off the loss. They will pursue you for the full amount." He put his glasses back on and looked at me. "And if you try to pay it off yourself, you are accepting ownership of the debt. If you make one payment, you are legally validating the account. And frankly, looking at your income versus this total balance, plus the interest rates on these cards, you will be drowning in 6 months. You cannot service this debt. Ms. Patterson, it will bury you." I felt the tears prickling again. "So I have to turn her in. You have to protect yourself," he corrected. "The person who committed this crime made a choice. They chose to put you in this position. You are not sending them to jail. You are simply filing a report that says, 'I did not do this.' What the legal system does with that information is out of your hands. I walked out of his office feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. The ambiguity was gone. The choice had been made for me by the math. But the universe was not done with me yet. When I arrived at North Lane Systems at 9:30, Ben looked up from his desk with a worried expression. "Marcus wants to see you," he said quietly. In his office, door closed. My stomach dropped. Marcus was my department head. He was the one advocating for my promotion to senior project lead. A closed-door meeting on a Wednesday morning was never good news. I walked to his office. The glass walls were frosted, offering a privacy that suddenly felt threatening. I knocked and entered. Marcus was sitting behind his desk, looking uncomfortable. He gestured for me to sit. "Madeline, thanks for coming in," he said. He did not smile. "Is this about the logistics project?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the chair. "Because I have the updated Gantt chart. It is not about the project," he said. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk. "It is about the background check for the senior lead position." I froze. I had forgotten. The promotion came with a salary bump, access to sensitive client financial data, and a mandatory security clearance review. HR flagged something this morning. Marcus said. He slid the paper across the desk. It was a summary of my credit report. The score was highlighted in yellow. The outstanding collection balance was highlighted in red. I stared at the paper. It felt like my dirty laundry was being aired in the corporate boardroom. "Madeline, you know the policy," Marcus said, his voice soft. "For the senior lead role, you handle client budgets in the millions. We have a fiduciary responsibility. Significant unresolved debt, especially in collections, is a major risk factor. It triggers an automatic hold on the promotion." I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, burning hot and fast. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaking, "this is not mine. I am a victim of identity theft. I am in the process of sorting it out." He nodded, but he looked skeptical. "I believe you," he said, though his tone suggested he was legally required to say that. "But until it is resolved, officially resolved, with documentation removing it from your record, we cannot move forward with the promotion. In fact, HR is asking for a formal explanation just to keep your current clearance active." My current clearance? My current job? I walked out of his office 10 minutes later with a deadline. I had 48 hours to provide proof that this was fraud, or my application would be pulled, and my current standing would be under review. The safety net I had built, the career, the reputation, the independence, was fraying. Brooke had not just stolen my past. She was actively eating my future. I went to my car at lunch. I could not breathe in the office. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard, and dialed my parents' home number. My mother answered on the second ring. "Hello? Mom, it is Madeline." Her voice instantly cooled. "I thought I told you not to call until you were ready to apologize to your sister." I closed my eyes. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers ached. "Mom, please listen to me. I just came from a meeting with my boss. This debt is showing up on my background check. They are freezing my promotion. They are talking about reviewing my current security clearance. So," she said, "tell them it is a mix-up. I cannot just tell them, 'Mom,'" I shouted, losing my composure. "I need proof. I met with a financial counselor. If I do not file a police report, I am liable for the money. I cannot pay $45,000. I will go bankrupt. I will lose my job." There was a silence on the line. Then, I heard a sniffle. "So that is it?" Linda said, her voice thick with tears. "You care more about some job than you do about your sister? You are willing to put Brooke in handcuffs just so you can get a promotion?" "It is not just a promotion," I pleaded. "It is my livelihood. It is my rent. Why is her comfort worth more than my survival?" "You are so selfish," Linda wept. "You have always been cold. Brooke is fragile. Madeline, she cannot handle the police. She cannot handle jail. If you do this, you are destroying this family. You are choosing strangers in suits over your own blood. Let me talk to her." Harold's voice came on the line. He had evidently been listening on the extension. "Dad," I said, hoping for reason. "Dad, you understand money. You know I cannot absorb this debt." "Madeline," Harold said, his voice low and hard, "if you go to the police, you are making a declaration of war. We handle things inside this house. We do not air our dirty laundry to the world. But you are not handling it," I cried. "You are ignoring it." "If you do this," Harold said, cutting me off, "do not expect us to be there for you when you fall. It is vindictive. Madeline, pure and simple, you are angry, and you want to hurt her." I hung up. I could not listen to it anymore. The word vindictive echoed in the small space of the car. It was a word they used to shut me down, a weaponized label to make my boundaries feel like aggression. I sat there for a long time, watching the employees of North Lane Systems walk to their cars for lunch. They looked so normal. They had worries about deadlines and cafeterias. I was worrying about whether sending my sister to prison would make me an orphan. I wiped my face. I took a deep breath. I was a project manager. I solved problems. I negotiated. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat. I drafted a document. It was a contract, a strict, binding agreement. It stated that Brooke acknowledged the debt was hers. It stated she would close every account immediately. It laid out a payment schedule where she would pay me directly, and I would pay the creditors, keeping the police out of it. It required her to surrender her passport to me as collateral. It was a desperate, fragile compromise. It was me trying to save her one last time, even though she was currently drowning me. I emailed it to the fake address she had created, Madeline Patterson, bizgmail.com, and I texted it to her personal number. "Brooke," I wrote, "this is the only way out. Sign this, start paying, and I will try to stall the bank investigation. You have 24 hours. After that, I have to go to the police to save my job." I waited. 24 hours passed. No response. 48 hours passed. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called the house. My mother let it ring. I was living in a state of suspended animation. I went to work. I avoided Marcus's gaze. I went home. I stared at my phone. On the third day, the silence was broken, but not by Brooke. I was sitting at my kitchen table on Friday morning, drinking coffee that tasted like acid, when my phone buzzed with a notification from the credit monitoring app. Alert. New inquiry. I frowned. I had placed a freeze on my credit 3 days ago with Tessa's help. I opened the app. Credit inquiry. Blocked. Summit Line Finance. Reason, frozen file. Date, today, 8:15 a.m. Someone had tried to open a new line of credit. Today, this morning, 3 days after I had confronted them. 3 days after I had told them I was facing financial ruin, I clicked on the details. The app provided a summary of the attempted application. Applicant, Madeline Patterson. Requested amount, $7,500. Contact phone, 555-0199. I stared at the number, 555-0199. It was my parents' landline. The world stopped, the last shred of denial. The tiny, pathetic hope I had been nurturing that maybe Brooke was sorry. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she had just made a mistake. It evaporated. She was not sorry. She was not stopping. She was actively trying to open more debt in my name. Right now. From my parents' house. And they were letting her. They knew I had caught her. They knew I was on the brink of losing my job. And yet, this morning, while they drank their coffee, Brooke had sat down at that computer and tried to steal another $7,000. Harold had called me vindictive. Linda had called me selfish. But they were the ones feeding me to the wolves. They were watching me bleed and asking for more blood. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I was done. The sadness was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard rage that felt like steel in my spine. I printed the notification. I gathered the photos I had printed earlier. I put the Ridgeway envelope in a plastic zip-top bag. I put on my coat. I walked out of my apartment. I got into my car. I did not drive to Ashwood Lane. I drove downtown. The Clearwater Ridge Police Department was a brick building that looked like a fortress. I walked up the concrete steps. I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby was cool and smelled of floor wax. A uniformed officer sat behind a high counter behind thick glass. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her computer. I took a breath. My voice did not shake. "I need to file a report for identity theft and fraud." I said. The officer looked up. She saw the stack of papers in my hand. She saw the look on my face. "Have a seat," she said, gesturing to a row of plastic chairs. "An officer will be with you shortly." I sat. I waited for 40 minutes. I watched people come and go, a teenager in handcuffs, a woman crying about a stolen purse. Finally, a heavy door buzzed open. A man in a suit walked out. He looked tired, with graying hair and a rumpled tie. "Ms. Patterson?" he called out. I stood up. "Yes, I am Detective Jonah Carver, Maple County Financial Crimes," he said. He extended a hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, dry. "Come on back," he said. I followed him into the back of the station. It was a maze of cubicles and fluorescent lights. He led me to a small office in the corner. His desk was covered in files, but he cleared a space for me. "So," he said, sitting down and opening a notepad, "tell me what is going on." I laid it all out. I placed the evidence on his desk piece by piece. The credit report, the photos of the application in the folder, the driver's license copy, the Ridgeway envelope with my name and my parents' address, and finally, the screenshot of the blocked inquiry from this morning with the landline number. I spoke clearly. I did not cry. I told him about the confronting. I told him about the confession. I told him about the threat to my job. Detective Carver listened. He did not interrupt. He looked at the papers. He tapped his pen on the desk. When I finished, there was a silence. I waited for him to tell me it was a civil matter. I waited for him to tell me to work it out with my family. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Ms. Patterson," he said. His voice was deep and calm. "This is extensive." I nodded. "It is $45,000. It is more than that," Carver said. He picked up the photo of the loan application. "This is bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft. These are felonies, serious ones." I felt a shiver go down my back. "I know," I whispered. He looked at me, his expression serious. "I need you to understand something. A lot of people come in here with similar stories. Family members using cards, borrowing names. Usually, it is messy. Usually, it is he said, she said." He tapped the screenshot of the Summit Line inquiry. "But this is clear-cut. This shows an ongoing pattern of criminal activity originating from a specific location after the victim had explicitly demanded it stop." He looked me in the eye. "You are not overreacting. Ms. Patterson, this is not family drama. This is a predator." Hearing him say it, hearing a stranger, a professional, validate the reality I had been gaslit about for days, almost broke me. I felt the tears welling up, but I blinked them back. "So, what happens now?" I asked. Carver opened a drawer and pulled out a form. "Now, we make it official," he said. "You sign this affidavit. I open a case file. And then, I pay a visit to 1402 Ashwood Lane." He handed me a pen. "Are you ready to do this?" he asked. "Once we start." The train leaves the station. The district attorney picks it up. "You cannot just call it off because your mom asks you to." I looked at the pen. I thought about the 3 days of silence. I thought about the $7,500 Brooke tried to steal this morning. I thought about the vindictive voicemail from my father. I thought about the life I had built, the quiet, boring peace I had purchased at such a high premium. I took the pen. "I am ready," I said. I signed my name. The ink was black and permanent. Detective Carver took the paper back. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let us get to work." The investigation moved with a speed that frightened me. I had expected a bureaucratic slog, a file gathering dust on a desk for months. But Detective Jonah Carver was a man who seemed to take financial predation personally. 3 weeks after I signed the affidavit, he called me into his office at the station. "I have something you need to see," he said. I sat in the hard plastic chair, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Carver turned his monitor toward me. We subpoenaed the security footage from the Ridgeway Bank branch in Oak Haven. He said, "This was recorded 14 months ago." He clicked a button. The video was grainy, black and white, and silent. It showed the interior of a bank lobby. The timestamp in the corner read October 12th, 2024. A woman walked into the frame. I stopped breathing. She was wearing a black blazer. I owned a black blazer exactly like that. She had her hair pulled back in a low bun, the way I wore mine for client meetings. She was carrying a leather portfolio, the kind I used for work. It was Brooke, but it was not the Brooke I knew, the one who wore oversized sweatshirts and messy buns, the one who slouched and avoided eye contact. This Brooke walked with a straight spine. She walked with purpose. She walked with my walk. I watched as she sat down at a desk across from a loan officer. I watched her smile, a confident, practiced smile. I watched her hand over documents. I watched her laugh at something the officer said. She looked competent. She looked successful. She looked exactly like me. "Is that you?" Carver asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," I whispered. "That is my sister. She is wearing your clothes?" "I think so," I said, feeling a wave of nausea. "That looks like my blazer. I thought I had lost it at the dry cleaners." "She signed the paperwork right there," Carver said, pointing to the screen. "She sat there for 40 minutes, pretending to be you, and walked out with a line of credit for $25,000. I stared at the screen. It was one thing to see the numbers on a report. It was another to see the performance. She had not just stolen my credit. She had worn my skin. She had studied me, the way I sat, the way I held a pen. She had turned my identity into a costume. "We have enough," Carver said, turning the monitor back. "I am getting a warrant signed by a judge this afternoon. We are going to execute a search at your parents' house tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" I asked. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, we need to seize the devices used to submit the online applications, the laptop, the phone, and any physical documents they might still be hiding." "Do I need to be there?" I asked. "No," Carver said. "In fact, I strongly advise you are not." I went to work the next day, but I was useless. I sat at my desk at Northlane Systems, moving a mouse around a screen without clicking anything. I watched the clock. 9 in the morning, 9:15, 9:30, at 9:42. My cell phone rang. It was Linda. I stared at the screen. I knew I should not answer. Carver had told me to let them leave voicemails, but the conditioning of 3 decades was too strong. The terrified child in me needed to know how bad the damage was. I picked up the phone and walked quickly into the empty stairwell. "Hello? You traitor?" The scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was a raw, animalistic sound. "You traitor!" Linda shrieked again. Her voice was breaking, ragged with hysteria. "There are police in my house. Madeline! There are police in my kitchen. Mom, do not you speak to me!" she screamed. "They are tearing everything apart. They are taking the computer. They are going through your father's drawers. The neighbors are watching. Madeline! Mrs. Higgins is standing on her porch watching police carry boxes out of my house." I leaned against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell. I closed my eyes. "I told you," I said quietly. "I told you I had to file a report. You turned this house into a crime scene," she sobbed. "You did this. You brought this filth into our home. They are handcuffing her. Madeline, they are putting handcuffs on your sister." "Good," I thought, but I did not say it. "Please," Linda begged, her anger suddenly collapsing into desperation. "Please tell them to stop. Tell them it was a mistake. She is scared. Madeline, she is crying. How can you let them do this?" "I cannot stop it, Mom," I said. "It is out of my hands." "You are evil," she whispered. "You are a cold, heartless bitch. I wish I had never. The line went dead. I stood there in the silence of the stairwell, shaking. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the steps, my head between my knees. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged, a voicemail, from Harold. I did not want to listen to it. I knew what it would contain. But I pressed play anyway. Madeline. His voice was low. It was the voice he used when I was a teenager and had stayed out past curfew. The voice of disappointed authority. I am calling to tell you that your mother has collapsed. She is in bed, and I do not know if she is going to get up. You have destroyed her. I hope you are happy with your little victory. You have chosen to ruin this family over money, over pride. There was a pause. I could hear his heavy breathing. If Brooke spends one night in jail, we will never forgive you. Do not call this house. Do not come here. You are dead to us. I saved the voicemail, not because I wanted to keep it, but because Detective Carver had told me to save everything. It was evidence. It was proof of witness intimidation. But to me, it was just proof that I was an orphan. By the afternoon, the news had broken. Clearwater Ridge was a small enough city that a police raid on a nice street like Ashwood Lane made the police blotter. I was in the break room getting water when I heard whispering. I turned around. 2 women from the accounting department were looking at a phone. They stopped talking when they saw me. I walked back to my desk. Ben was staring at his screen, his face pale. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing," Ben said quickly. He tried to close the browser tab. "Ben," I said, "show me." He hesitated, then sighed and turned the screen. It was the local news website. Local woman arrested in identity theft ring. And there was the mugshot. Brooke looked terrible. Her makeup was smeared, her hair wild, her eyes red and puffy. She looked like a frightened child, but beneath the fear, I saw the sullenness I knew so well, the look that said, "This is so unfair," underneath the photo. The article read, Brooke Patterson, 28, was arrested this morning on 12 counts of felony identity theft and wire fraud. Police allege she stole over $40,000 from a family member. A family member. Everyone at North Lane knew I was a Patterson. Everyone knew I had a sister. I felt the eyes of the office on me. I felt the heat of their curiosity. Is that Madeline's sister? Did Madeline turn her in? That is cold. I could hear the unsaid words. I would never do that to my family. They did not know. They did not know about the years of gaslighting. They did not know about the $500 vet bills I paid for dogs that were not mine. They did not know about the credit card rejection. They did not know about the Vindictive label. I packed my bag. I walked out of the office at 2 p.m. I did not ask for permission. 2 days later, Detective Carver called me again. "You need to come down here," he said. I drove to the station. The numbness was starting to set in. I felt like I was moving through a world made of gray cotton. Carver looked different this time. He looked angrier. "We have finished the initial forensic audit of the accounts," he said. "We traced where the money went." I nodded. "The boutique? The gambling?" "Yes," Carver said. "A lot of it went to Clearview Threads. Some of it went to online casinos. But there was a chunk, about $6,000, that went somewhere else." "Where?" I asked. "It was used to pay a mortgage." Carver said. I frowned. "Brooke does not have a mortgage. She rents." "I know." Carver said. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a transaction record from the fraudulent Ridgeway account. Payment to First National Mortgage, account holder, Harold and Linda Patterson. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. "And here," Carver said, pointing to another line, "Payment to Visa, cardholder, Linda Patterson." I looked up at him. I felt the room tilting. "My parents?" I whispered. Carver nodded grimly. "Your sister used the stolen funds to catch up on your parents' overdue mortgage payments and pay down your mother's credit card debt." I felt like I was going to be sick. "They knew," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "They did not just know because she told them. They knew because they were spending the money." Carver leaned forward. "We found emails on the seized laptop. Your sister sent them confirmations. Paid the house bill. She wrote, 'Do not worry about it. They benefited. I said. Carver nodded. Materially. That changes things. Madeline, it means they were not just protecting her. They were protecting their own financial interests. If she went down, the money stopped. I sat back in the chair. I thought about Harold's voicemail. You have chosen to ruin this family over money. He had been right. It was about money, but not mine. Theirs. They had let her steal my identity because it kept a roof over their heads. They had sacrificed my future to pay for their present. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, that I could not even cry. I just felt a cold, hard stone form in the center of my chest. Are you going to charge them? I asked. We are looking into it, Carver said. But it is harder to prove intent with them. They can claim they thought the money was legitimate earnings from her business. But for your sister? This nails the coffin shut. A week later, the first hearing was scheduled at the Maple County Courthouse. I went. I had to. Carver told me I needed to be visible. I sat in the back row. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood. The door opened, and my parents walked in. They were dressed in their Sunday best. Harold wore his navy suit. Linda wore a cream-colored dress. They looked respectable. They looked like the victims. They did not look at me. They walked past the row where I was sitting as if I were invisible. Then, the lawyer walked in. He was not a public defender. He was a man in a sharp gray suit, with a silk tie and a leather briefcase that cost more than my first car. He shook hands with Harold. He touched Linda's elbow gently. I recognized him. Callan Price. He was the most expensive defense attorney in the county. He was the guy you hired when you had money and you wanted to make a problem disappear. I leaned forward, confused. How could they afford Callan Price? They were behind on their mortgage. They had credit card debt. Then I remembered. 6 months ago, my father had mentioned casually that he was thinking of dipping into his retirement account to do some renovations. The 401k. He had said, the nest egg. They had liquidated their retirement. They had taken the money meant for their old age, the money that I, the responsible daughter, would likely have to supplement one day, and they were burning it to hire a shark to defend the daughter who had robbed them. They were destroying their own future to destroy mine. Brooke was brought in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit. She looked small and pale. She scanned the crowd. Her eyes landed on our parents, and she gave a weak, tremulous smile. Then her eyes found me. Her expression changed. It hardened. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and loathing. Callan Price stood up. Your Honor, he said, his voice smooth and confident. We are entering a plea of not guilty. Not guilty. I closed my eyes. They were going to fight it. They were going to drag this out. They were going to make me testify. After the hearing, I was introduced to the Assistant District Attorney, Erin Locke. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a bob cut and a terrifying intellect. She took me into a conference room. Ms. Patterson, she said, not wasting time on pleasantries. Mr. Price is going to play hardball. His strategy is going to be to paint this as a family dispute. He is going to argue that you gave your sister permission to use your name, that this was an informal loan arrangement that went sour, and now you are using the police to settle a score. I felt a spark of indignation. That is a lie. It does not matter if it is a lie. Locke said, it matters if a jury believes it, and he will have your parents on the stand testifying that you knew about it. He will have them testifying that you are jealous, vindictive, and controlling. She looked at me closely. I need to know right now. Madeline, are you ready for that? Because if you get up on that stand and you wobble, if you hesitate, if you try to protect them, we lose. And if we lose, that debt stays yours. I looked at her. I thought about the mortgage payment. I thought about the retirement fund. I am ready. I said, are you sure? Locke pressed. You are going to have to call your mother a liar in open court. You are going to have to help us send your sister to prison. I thought about the word traitor. I am sure. I said, good. Locke said, I walked out of the conference room. I made it as far as the ladies' restroom before my knees gave out. I rushed into a stall and threw up. I retched until my stomach was empty, and then I retched some more. My body was rejecting the reality I was living in. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I sat on the cold tile floor of the stall, wiping my mouth with rough toilet paper. I was the bad guy. In their story, I was the villain. I was the one tearing the family apart. I stood up. I went to the sink. I rinsed my mouth. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked older than 32, but I also looked like someone who owned her own face. I drove home in silence. When I got to my apartment, I sat on my couch. I did not turn on the lights. I opened my laptop. I logged into my email. I searched for Brooke's name. There were hundreds of emails from over the years. Can I borrow money? Funny cat video. Mom is being annoying, but there was one I had never opened. It was from 6 months ago. The subject line was, "You will forgive me someday." I had ignored it at the time because I was busy with work, and Brooke's dramatic subject lines were usually bait for attention. I clicked on it. "Hey Mads, I know you are probably busy being the project manager queen, but I just wanted to say that I love you. I know I screw up a lot. I know you think I am a mess, but I am trying to fix things. I am trying to build something real with clear view threads, and I know that sometimes I have to do things my own way to get there. I borrowed your good name for a bit, just a little, because you were always the lucky one. You always got the good grades. You got the good job. You got the brain that works right. Things just come easy for you. I knew you would not mind helping me out, even if I did not ask officially, because that is what big sisters do. They share the luck, and when I am a millionaire from this business, I will pay you back double, and you will see that I was right. You will forgive me someday. You always do. Love, Brooke." I stared at the screen. You were always the lucky one. She truly believed it. She believed that my 60-hour work weeks, my budget spreadsheets, my disciplined savings, that was all just luck. She believed that her chaos was a condition inflicted upon her, not a series of choices she made. And the most twisting knife of all, you will forgive me someday. You always do. She had banked on my love. She had calculated my forgiveness as an asset she could spend. She had leveraged my loyalty against my credit score. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights of Clearwater Ridge. She was wrong. I was not lucky. I was a survivor. And she was wrong about the other thing, too. I would not forgive her. Not this time. The Bank of Madeline was closed. The account was overdrawn, and the bill was finally coming due. Winter in Clearwater Ridge had a way of stripping everything down to its bones. The trees were bare skeletons against a slate-gray sky, and the wind off the river carried a bite that settled deep in your joints. It was February when the pretrial hearing for the People versus Brooke Patterson began, and the weather felt entirely appropriate for the bleakness of the occasion. I walked into the Maple County Courthouse alone. It was a cavernous building of marble and echoing footsteps, a place designed to make you feel small. I clutched my coat tighter around myself, my heels clicking a lonely rhythm on the polished floor. I scanned the hallway outside courtroom 4, half expecting to see a familiar face. Perhaps my friend Tessa, but I had told her not to come. This was a family demolition, and I did not want spectators. I pushed through the heavy double doors. The air inside was stagnant and warm. I looked toward the front of the room. There they were. My parents, Linda and Harold, were seated in the front row directly behind the defense table. They were leaning forward, their bodies angled toward Brooke, who sat slumped in her chair next to her expensive attorney, Callan Price. Linda had her hand resting on Brooke's shoulder, a constant, tactile reassurance. Harold was whispering something into Linda's ear, his face grave and protective. They formed a tight, impenetrable phalanx, a single organism of shared anxiety and defense. They did not look back when the door closed behind me. They did not turn their heads. It was as if I were a ghost, invisible and inconsequential to their reality. I was no longer their daughter. I was the prosecution's witness. I was the threat. I took a seat in the back row, on the opposite side of the aisle. The physical distance felt like a canyon. I watched the back of my mother's head. the way she had curled her hair just so, and felt a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. I wondered if she had made breakfast for Brooke that morning. I wondered if they had driven here together. Discussing how to handle the Madeline problem, Erin Locke, the assistant district attorney, walked in through a side door. She spotted me and gave a curt nod before motioning for me to join her in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom. I stood up and walked down the aisle. As I passed my family, I saw Brooke shift. She glanced at me out of the corner of her eye. There was no remorse in that look. There was only resentment, sharp and hot. I entered the conference room. Locke closed the door, shutting out the murmur of the gathering court. "We have an offer on the table," Locke said, dropping her briefcase onto the table. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. "What is it?" "The defense is proposing a plea to a misdemeanor charge of unauthorized use of financial information." Locke explained, "No felony conviction, 2 years of probation." She would agree to attend financial counseling. "And the debt?" I asked. Locke hesitated. "The proposal frames the debt as a civil dispute. They want to classify it as a familial loan that was misappropriated. Brooke would agree to a restitution order, but legally, it would treat the origin of the funds as a misunderstanding between sisters rather than criminal identity theft." I felt the blood drain from my face. "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. "She stole my social security number. She forged my signature. She opened accounts I did not know existed. Mr. Price is arguing that because you are family, and because you had helped her financially in the past, there was an implied consent," Locke said. "He wants to wipe the felony off the table so she does not have a criminal record." "If I accept that," I said slowly, realizing the trap, "then I am admitting that I might have authorized it." Locke nodded grimly. "It muddies the waters. If the court record says it was a misunderstanding, the banks might use that against you. They could argue that since it was not strictly theft, you are still liable as the account holder who failed to supervise an authorized user." I stood up. I began to pace the small room. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Even now, facing prison, Brooke wanted me to absorb the risk. She wanted to walk away clean while I spent the next decade fighting creditors who would point to a court order saying it was just a family squabble. "No," I said. Locke watched me. "You are sure?" "It would end this today. You would not have to testify." I turned to face her. The anger that had been simmering in my gut for months flared up, bright and consuming. "I cannot agree to anything that leaves me liable," I said, my voice shaking with the force of my refusal. "I cannot agree to a lie. She did not borrow my name. She stole it. If we call it a misunderstanding, then I am the one who pays. I am the one who loses my clearance. I am the one who goes bankrupt." I leaned my hands on the table, looking Locke in the eye. "She wants to ruin me to save herself," I said, "and my parents are helping her do it. I will not sign that plea." Locke studied me for a long moment. A look of genuine respect crossed her usually stoic face. "Okay," she said. "I will tell Price the misdemeanor is off the table. We go for the felony, or we go to trial." We walked back into the courtroom. The judge had not yet taken the bench. Locke approached the defense table. I stayed back. But I watched. I saw Locke speak to Callan Price. I saw Price's smooth, tanned face tighten. He leaned over and whispered to Brooke. Brooke's head snapped up, her eyes widening in panic. She grabbed her mother's hand. Linda looked over at me then. Her expression was pure venom. She mouthed something that looked like, "How could you—" Price stood up and walked over to where I was standing near the railing. He smelled of expensive cologne and intimidation. "Ms. Patterson," he said, his voice low and silky. "A word?" I looked at Locke, who stepped up beside me. "Anything you have to say?" "You can say to the DA," I said. Price smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I just wanted to make sure you have thought this through. Madeline, trials are messy things, public things." "I am aware," I said. "Are you?" Price asked. "Because if we go to trial, the defense will be obligated to present a full character profile of the complaining witness. That would be you." He paused, letting the silence stretch. We would have to revisit your history of dishonesty, he said. My history of dishonesty? I asked, genuinely confused. I have never even had a speeding ticket. Price checked his cufflinks. I am referring to the incident at Greenway Market. When you were 17, the missing deposit bag? The air left my lungs as if I had been punched in the solar plexus. Greenway Market. I had not thought about Greenway Market in 15 years. It was a small, dusty grocery store where I had worked the summer before my senior year of high school. Brooke, then 13, had come to visit me one afternoon. She had been hanging around the back office where the safe was kept open during the shift change. Price saw the recognition in my eyes. He smiled wider. Your parents recall that you admitted to taking $200 from the safe, he said softly. You confessed to the manager. You were fired. It establishes a pattern. Do not you think? A pattern of financial impropriety? Of lying? He leaned in closer. If you insist on pressing these felony charges, Madeline, I will put your mother on the stand, and she will testify that you have been stealing money and lying about it since you were a teenager. We will paint you as a pathological liar who is framing her sister to cover her own debts. He straightened up. Think about it. The misdemeanor plea is a gift. Take it. He walked away. I stood frozen. The courtroom blurred. I was 17 again. Flashback, the office of Greenway Market smelled of stale cigarette smoke and floor wax. Mr. Henderson, the manager, was red-faced and sweating. $200 is gone. Madeline, he shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. It was in the bag 5 minutes ago. I stood by the filing cabinet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had not taken it. I had been stocking shelves in aisle 4. But Brooke was there. She was sitting on a folding chair in the corner, swinging her legs, clutching her oversized purse. She looked terrified. Mr. Henderson turned to Brooke. What about you? Did you see anyone? Brooke's lower lip trembled. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, filled with a desperate, watery panic. Then, the door opened. My mother rushed in. What is going on? Linda demanded. Mr. Henderson explained. The money was missing. The police were being called. Linda looked at Brooke. She saw the new glitter lip gloss sticking out of Brooke's purse. She saw the guilt written plainly on her youngest daughter's face. Linda grabbed my arm and pulled me into the hallway, away from Mr. Henderson. Her grip was painful. Madeline, she whispered, her voice frantic. You have to say you took it. What? I whispered back, horrified. No. I did not touch it. Brooke did. I know, Linda hissed, but Brooke is 13. If she gets in trouble with the police now, it will go on her permanent record. It will ruin her chances for that private school scholarship. You are 17. You are a minor. They will just fire you. They will not arrest you if you give it back. Mom, no, I cried. I am not going to say I am a thief. Linda's face crumpled. She began to cry. Please, Madeline, please, do this for the family. Do this for your sister. She is not strong like you. She cannot handle this. You are the strong one. Please, just say you borrowed it. I will pay it back. Just take the blame. I looked at my mother's weeping face. I looked at Brooke through the open door, looking so small and pathetic. The weight of their expectation crushed me. I was the eldest. I was the responsible one. My job was to fix things. I walked back into the office. I felt sick. I took it. I lied. My voice was barely a whisper. I am sorry. I needed it. Mr. Henderson looked disappointed. He looked heartbroken. I thought better of you. Madeline, he said, I was fired. My mother paid the money back. We never spoke of it again. End flashback. I blinked, bringing the courtroom back into focus. The memory did not make me afraid. It did not make me want to retreat. Instead, it acted like a match thrown into a pool of gasoline. I realized, with a clarity that was sharp enough to cut glass, that this had been the plan all along. They had been grooming me for this moment since I was a child. They had trained me to be the scapegoat. They had taught me that my integrity was a currency to be spent to purchase Brooke's safety. They thought the threat of exposing my crime would silence me. They thought I would be ashamed, but I was not ashamed. I was furious. I turned to Locke. "No deal." I said. My voice was hard. Locke looked at me, concerned. "What did he say?" "He threatened to bring up an incident from when I was 17. I said, "An incident where I took the blame for a theft Brooke committed because my mother begged me to." Locke's eyes narrowed. "He is going to try to impeach your credibility with a juvenile incident?" "Let him try." I said, "Let him put my mother on the stand and ask her about it. Because if she lies under oath, I will tear her apart." I looked at my parents. They were watching me, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for the good daughter to fold. I stared straight at them, and for the first time in my life, I did not blink. "We are going to trial," I told Locke. The trial began 2 weeks later. The courtroom was fuller this time. Local reporters were there. The story of the sister-against-sister identity theft had gained traction. It was a human interest tragedy. I sat at the prosecution table with Locke. My parents sat behind the defense table. The lines were drawn. Locke's opening statement was clinical and devastating. She laid out the timeline, the fake email addresses, the IP addresses, the surveillance video. Colin Price's opening statement was a work of fiction. He spoke of a troubled family dynamic, of a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, of an older sister who was controlling and jealous. Then, the evidence phase began. Locke called the detective, Jonah Carver, to the stand. Carver was solid. He walked the jury through the paper trail. He showed the loan application with the inflated income. He showed the credit card statements filled with charges for casinos and spas. But the bombshell dropped on the second day. Locke stood up holding a document I had never seen before. "Your Honor, the people move to introduce Exhibit G." Locke said, "This is the original application for the Ridgeway Bank small business loan." She handed a copy to the defense. Price looked at it and frowned. Locke put the document on the overhead projector. "We have focused on the defendant, Brooke Patterson." Locke said to the jury, "But this document reveals another layer to the fraud." She zoomed in on the bottom of the page. There was the signature of the primary borrower, Madeline Patterson, forged, and below it, a section for a guarantor, signed Linda Patterson. I gasped. I could not help it. The sound was loud in the quiet courtroom. I stared at the screen. My mother's signature, distinctive, with the loop on the L, and below her signature, a checkbox was marked, Co-owner of business. My head spun. Linda had not just known about the loan. She had co-signed for it. She had legally vouched for the existence of a business she knew was fake. She had claimed to be a co-owner of an entity that did not exist, solely to help Brooke steal $25,000 in my name. I looked at Linda. She was staring at her lap, her face pale as parchment. Harold was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. They had lied to me. Even when I confronted them in the kitchen, even when they admitted they knew, they had hidden this. They had let me believe it was just passive enabling, but it was active participation. My mother had literally signed the instrument of my destruction. Locke turned to the jury. The defendant's mother, Linda Patterson, signed as a guarantor. This suggests that the family was not only aware of the fraud, but actively facilitated it to secure funds based on the victim's credit rating. The courtroom buzzed. The narrative of the innocent family caught in the middle was shredding before everyone's eyes. Then, it was my turn. The bailiff called my name. Madeline Patterson. I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I walked to the witness stand. I placed my hand on the Bible. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. I looked out at the room. I saw the jury, 12 strangers who would decide my fate. I saw the reporters. I saw Brooke, looking small and angry. I saw my parents, who still refused to meet my eyes. Locke approached the podium. "Ms. Patterson, can you tell the jury when you first discovered the debt?" I took a breath. I told the story. I told them about the call from Harborline Collections. I told them about the panic in the parking lot. I told them about the credit report, the sinking feeling of seeing my parents' address. How did this impact your life? Locke asked. I gripped the edges of the witness box. It destroyed my peace, I said, my voice trembling but clear. I could not sleep. I could not eat. I received calls at work from collectors. My credit score, which I had spent 10 years building, dropped 200 points overnight. I looked at the jury. I was up for a promotion. I said, a senior project lead position. I had worked for it for 3 years. But when the background check came back, I was flagged. My boss called me in. He told me I was a security risk. I almost lost my job. I almost lost my clearance. I had to beg them to give me time to prove I wasn't a criminal. I wiped a tear from my cheek. I felt like I was drowning. I said, and the people who were pushing my head under the water were the people who were supposed to love me. The courtroom was silent. I could hear the scratching of the court reporter's machine. Locke nodded. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. She sat down. Callan Price stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked toward me like a predator scenting blood. Ms. Patterson, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You claim you were devastated, yet isn't it true that you have a history of controlling your sister's finances? No, I said. Price picked up a piece of paper. We have texts here from 3 years ago where you tell Brooke she is not allowed to buy a new car. Is that true? I advised her not to buy a car she could not afford. I corrected. She had no job and wanted a luxury sedan. I told her I would not co-sign for it. Price smiled. So you decided what she could and could not have. You acted as the parent, didn't you? I acted as a responsible adult. I said. Price paced back and forth. You resent Brooke, don't you? You resent that she is the baby of the family. You resent that your parents help her. I resent that she stole $45,000 from me. I said sharply. Price stopped. He looked at me. Let us talk about Greenway Market, he said. I tensed. Here it was. Price leaned on the railing. When you were 17, you were fired for theft. Is that correct? Objection. Locke stood up. Irrelevant and prejudicial. Overruled. The judge said. It goes to credibility. Price repeated the question. You admitted to stealing money from a safe, yes or no? I looked at Price. I looked past him to Linda. She was finally looking at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She was begging me, once again, to take the fall, to keep the secret, to protect the lie. I took a deep breath. I admitted to it. Yes, I said. Price smirked. So you are a thief. I did not stop. I admitted to it because my mother told me to. I said, my voice rising. Price's smile faltered. Excuse me? I admitted to it because my sister, who was 13, had taken the money. I said, speaking clearly to the jury, and my mother, Linda Patterson, pulled me into the hallway and begged me to take the blame so Brooke wouldn't get a record. She told me I was the strong one. She told me to sacrifice myself for the family. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Price looked stunned. He hadn't expected me to blow up the family secret. I pointed at Linda. She taught me to lie for Brooke, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. She taught me that my reputation didn't matter as long as Brooke was safe. And that is what happened here. They expected me to pay this debt. They expected me to ruin my credit and my career, so Brooke wouldn't have to face the consequences. But I am done. I am done lying for them. Price looked at the judge. Your Honor, I did not steal that money at Greenway, I said, looking straight at the jury. And I did not borrow that money from Ridgeway Bank. I am the victim here, and I am finished being the scapegoat. Price stood there, his mouth slightly open. He looked at Linda. Linda had buried her face in her hands. I have no further questions, Price mumbled. I stepped down from the stand. My legs were shaking, but my head was high. I walked back to the prosecution table. I did not look at my parents. I did not need to. I felt their shock radiating off them like heat. They had brought a knife to a gunfight. They had relied on the old Madeline, the compliant Madeline. But that Madeline was gone. She had died the moment she saw her mother's signature on the fraud application. The trial continued, but the air in the room had changed. The truth was out. The family dynamic, The sick, twisted architecture of it had been exposed for everyone to see, and as I sat there, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light from the high windows, I realized that I had already won the only victory that mattered. I had spoken the truth, and the sky hadn't fallen. The courtroom for the sentencing hearing felt different than it had during the trial. The frenetic energy of the arguments was gone, replaced by a heavy, somber finality. The air smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Brooke had eventually accepted a plea. After my testimony about the Greenway Market incident and the revelation of my mother's signature on the loan documents, the defense had collapsed. Callan Price had seen the writing on the wall. They had pleaded guilty to 4 counts of felony identity theft and 2 counts of wire fraud in exchange for the dismissal of the remaining charges. But today was not about guilt or innocence. That had been established. Today was about consequences. I looked at the defense table. Brooke was wearing a bright orange county jumpsuit. It clashed horribly with her pale, drawn skin. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Stripped of the makeup and the bravado that usually acted as her armor, she did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the table or turned them toward the gallery behind her, where our parents sat. Linda and Harold were there, of course. They were leaning forward, practically vibrating with the need to comfort her. Linda was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, and Harold had a protective arm around the back of her chair. They beamed affection at Brooke, mouthing silent words of reassurance. "It will be okay. We are here." They looked at her like she was a martyr. They looked at me like I was the executioner. Judge Marlon Haynes entered the courtroom. He was a man with a stern face and eyes that seemed to have seen every variety of human disappointment. He took his seat on the bench, his black robe settling around him like the wings of a crow. "We are here for sentencing in the matter of the People versus Brooke Patterson," Judge Haynes said. His voice was a deep rumble that filled the room. Aaron Locke, the assistant district attorney, stood up. "Your Honor, the People request a sentence that reflects the severity of the violation. This was not a one-time error. This was a sustained, calculated campaign of theft against a family member who had already provided extensive support." She sat down. It was time for the character statements. Callan Price stood up. "Your Honor, we have a statement from the defendant's mother, Linda Patterson." Linda stood up. She walked to the podium. She looked fragile, her hands trembling as she smoothed the paper in front of her. She did not look at the judge at first. She looked at Brooke, offering a watery smile of encouragement. "Your Honor," Linda began, her voice quivering, "I am asking you today for mercy. I am asking you not to destroy our family." She took a shaky breath. "Brooke is a good girl. She has a big heart. She has just had some bad luck with her business, and she made some desperate choices. But she never meant to hurt anyone. She loves her sister. They have always been close." I felt a muscle jump in my jaw. Close? We were victims and predators. That was a form of closeness, I supposed. This whole thing, Linda continued, gesturing vaguely with her hand. "It has all been blown out of proportion. Sisters fight. Families have disagreements about money. It happens. If we had just been given a chance to handle this privately, within the family, we could have fixed it. We could have paid the money back." She paused, and then she turned her head slightly. For the first time, she looked at me. Her eyes were cold, hard flints of accusation. "But Madeline insisted on involving the police," Linda said, her voice sharpening. "She insisted on making an example of her sister. She wanted to punish Brooke instead of helping her. And now we are here, with our family name dragged through the mud, all because of a stubborn refusal to forgive." She looked back at the judge, tears spilling over her cheeks. "Please, Your Honor, do not send my baby to prison. She has suffered enough. She has been humiliated. She needs her family, not a jail cell." She stepped down. Harold stood up as she returned to her seat, guiding her down. He nodded solemnly at the judge, endorsing every word. He did not look at me. Not once. I felt a fire igniting in my chest. It was not the wild, consuming fire of the discovery. It was a cold, blue flame of absolute clarity. "Ms. Patterson?" Judge Haynes said, looking at me. "The DA indicated you wished to make a victim impact statement." I stood up. My legs felt steady. I walked to the podium. I placed my own piece of paper down, but I did not look at it. I knew what I had to say. "Your Honor," I said. My voice was calm. It did not sound like the voice of the girl who used to hide in the bathroom to cry. "My mother just told you that this was a sister's fight. She told you that I am here because I wanted to make an example of the defendant." I looked at Brooke. She was staring at her hands. "I am not here to make an example." I said, "I am here because for 14 months, my sister wore my face. She used my name to lie to banks. She used my credit to gamble. She used my identity to pay for her life, while I was left to pay for the wreckage." I gripped the sides of the podium. The fraud hollowed me out. I said, "It was not just the money. Though $45,000 is a life-altering amount of debt for me, it was the humiliation. I had to stand in front of my boss and explain why collectors were calling the office. I had to sit in front of strangers at the bank and prove that I was not a criminal. I lost my sleep. I lost my sense of safety. I lost the pride I had in the good name I had built. I looked at my parents, but the worst part was not the debt. I continued. The worst part was realizing that I was considered collateral damage. When I went to my parents for help, they told me I was being dramatic. When I told them I was drowning, they told me to swim harder so Brooke wouldn't get wet. I paused. The courtroom was silent. I realized that in my family. My safety was the currency they were willing to spend to buy her comfort. I realized that to them, I am not a daughter, I am a resource. I am the insurance policy they cash in when their favorite child makes a mistake. I looked back at the judge. I am asking for a sentence that acknowledges that my life has value. Your Honor, that my future matters. Because for my entire life, I have been told that it does not. I walked back to my seat. Judge Haynes watched me go. His face was unreadable. He made a note on the file in front of him. He looked at the defense table. He looked at the prosecution. "The defense has argued for probation," Judge Haynes said. "They cite the defendant's lack of prior criminal history, at least, lack of prior convictions, and her strong family support system." He gestured toward Linda and Harold. "I see that support system here today," he said. Callan Price nodded vigorously. "Yes, Your Honor, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson are 100% behind Brooke. They are ready to house her, help her find employment, and ensure she stays on the right path." Judge Haynes nodded slowly. He tapped his pen on the bench. He looked at Brooke, then he looked at me, and then his gaze settled on Linda and Harold. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson," Judge Haynes said, "would you please stand?" My parents looked confused. They exchanged a glance. Slowly, they stood up. Harold adjusted his jacket. Linda dabbed her nose. Judge Haynes leaned forward. He clasped his hands in front of him. "I have sat on this bench for 20 years, he said. "I have seen drug dealers, embezzlers, and violent offenders. I have seen families torn apart by addiction and poverty." He paused. "But I have rarely seen a dynamic quite like this one." Linda smiled tentatively, perhaps thinking this was a compliment. "You ask for leniency because you say you are a loving family," the judge continued. "You say this could have been handled privately. You say the victim, your daughter Madeline, is being vindictive." He picked up the file. "I see here that Mrs. Patterson signed as a guarantor on a fraudulent loan. I see here that funds from the victim's stolen identity were used to pay your mortgage." He dropped the file. It made a loud slap in the quiet room. "I have a question for you," Judge Haynes said, "and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." He looked directly at them. His eyes were piercing. "At what point, exactly, did you decide that your younger daughter's comfort was worth more than your elder daughter's entire future?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The courtroom fell utterly silent. You could hear the hum of the ventilation system. You could hear the intake of breath from the gallery. Linda's mouth opened. She looked like she wanted to speak, to offer one of her ready-made excuses about sisters and misunderstandings. But no sound came out. She looked at the judge, and she saw that he knew. He saw her. He saw the rot beneath the respectable cream-colored dress. Harold's face drained of color. He looked from the judge to me, and for a split second, I saw shame in his eyes. Real, naked shame. He looked away quickly. Staring at the floor, Judge Haynes waited. He let the silence stretch until it was agonizing. "You have no answer," the judge said softly. He leaned back. "You speak of saving your family," Judge Haynes said, "but you sacrificed one child to save the other. Without victims like Madeline having the courage to report, families like yours would go on sacrificing the quiet child forever. You would have bled her dry until there was nothing left, and you would have called it love." He turned his gaze to Brooke. "Brooke Patterson, please stand." Brooke stood up. She was trembling. She looked at her parents, but they were staring at the floor, withered by the judge's rebuke. "You relied on your sister to fix your mistakes," Judge Haynes said, "and when she refused, you stole from her. You exploited the person who protected you. That is a violation of trust that goes beyond money." He opened the folder. "I sentence you to a prison term of 3 years, suspended." Brooke let out a sob of relief. Linda slumped against Harold. However, the judge continued, his voice hardening. "You will serve 5 years of probation. During this time, you will complete 2,000 hours of community service. You will maintain full-time employment, and you will pay restitution to Madeline Patterson in the amount of $45,280. He looked at her over his glasses. "This restitution will be garnished from your wages. It will be monitored by this court. If you miss a payment, the suspension on your prison sentence will be lifted, and you will serve the full 3 years. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brooke whispered. "And furthermore," Judge Haynes said, "I am entering a judicial finding of fact that Madeline Patterson bears 0% responsibility for these debts. This judgment will be sent to every credit bureau and every lender involved. She is exonerated of all moral and financial blame in this matter." He slammed the gavel. "Court is adjourned." The sound echoed like a gunshot. I sat there for a moment. The relief was not a wave. It was a slow, steady receding of the floodwaters. I was exonerated. It was official. The nightmare of the debt was over. I stood up. I watched the bailiff approach Brooke. "Ms. Patterson, come with me for processing," he said. He took a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Brooke's eyes went wide. "Mom?" she whimpered. Linda and Harold surged forward. "It is okay." "Honey," Linda cried, reaching for her. "It is just for the paperwork. We will be right here. We will call Mr. Price." The bailiff clicked the cuffs onto Brooke's wrists. The metal sound was sharp and final. I walked out of the courtroom. I walked down the long marble hallway and pushed through the heavy doors into the cold winter air. The sun was blindingly bright, reflecting off the snow that had fallen the night before. I stood on the steps, breathing in the clean, sharp air. A few minutes later, the doors opened behind me. Linda and Harold came out. They looked shell-shocked. The judge's words were still ringing in their ears. I was sure, sacrificing the quiet child. They saw me standing there. They stopped. I waited. I did not know what I was waiting for. Maybe an apology. Maybe just an acknowledgement. Maybe for them to look at me and see me. Just for a second. I watched them hover. I saw the conflict in Harold's face. I saw the defensive wall rising back up in Linda's eyes. Then, the side door of the courthouse opened. 2 officers were leading Brooke out to the transport van to take her for processing. Brooke saw them. "Mom! Dad!" she called out. The hesitation in my parents vanished. They turned away from me. They turned their backs on the daughter who had done everything right. And they ran toward the daughter who was in handcuffs. "Do not worry." "Brooke," Linda shouted, waving her arms. "We are coming. We are right here." I watched them go. I watched them huddle around the police van, blowing kisses through the wire mesh of the window. I stood alone on the steps. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There was a voicemail from my father from 3 days ago that I hadn't listened to. There was an unread email from Brooke. I looked at the notifications. I pressed delete. Then I pressed delete again. The judge's question echoed in my mind. At what point did you decide her comfort was worth more than your future? They had made their decision a long time ago. Today, finally, I had made mine. I buttoned my coat. I turned my back on the courthouse, on the police van, on the parents who were frantically waving at a criminal. I walked down the steps toward the parking lot. The wind was cold, but the sun was warm on my face. The silence around me wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I had lost my family. But as I unlocked my car and sat in the driver's seat that I had paid for with my own money, I realized something else. I had found myself, and for the first time in 32 years, I was free. Thank you so much for listening to Revenge Stories. I hope Madeline's journey resonated with you. It is a hard thing to stand up for yourself when the people you love are the ones holding you down. But sometimes, the truth is the only way to freedom. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next episode. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. Do you think Madeline did the right thing? Would you have been able to testify against your own sister? Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, your future is worth fighting for.